But if we have to import people, it should be under the strict guidance of you need to do as you're told. You and your family need to integrate. You need to get rid of all these cultural traits because they're not tolerated in this country. And if you don't, we're going to deport you. Do you still want to come in and live a much better life? She's also attacking in some way our democracy. That no, you do not have free speech, Nigel Farage. You cannot campaign in this country because you're open to assault. And the fact she got a slap on the wrist reinforces that message. It's easier to get me and you to do it because we're more pliable. We're more law-abiding. So let's me and you change to fit in with the third world cultures we keep importing in.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 64 of The Mayor and I, a pre-Christmas edition. We're going to do a Christmas special later. Just before, in fact, we're meeting up on Christmas Eve, aren't we, Nick?
Christmas Eve is a Christmas special.
Yeah, so I'm coming round to Nick's house on Christmas Eve. He's making me a turkey sandwich. And then I'm spending Christmas Day with you as well because I've got nowhere else to go.
And that's because you want to see what's in my big sack.
I'm not sure these homoerotic terms that we're bringing in are what our listeners are wanting to hear. But yeah, so welcome to The Mayor and I, episode 64. I being Lindsay Khan, the Mayor being Nick Buckley, MBE, where we cover and discuss things of interest, hopefully, to our viewers. And if you like what you see, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and comments are great. Thank you. Welcome, Nick Buckley, MBE.
Thank you. Almost 28,000 subscribers now.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's really, I mean, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people. And I think a couple of one of the recent clips did 200,000, is now over 200,000 views as well. So there's lots of things happening. And that's despite, Nick, that's despite the fact that we only found out last week that for most of the last 50 episodes or whatever, you've had my microphone the wrong way around. And multiple viewers have been writing and complaining, what's wrong with that guy on the right? He can't speak properly. Your microphone's switched off, but you've actually had my microphone the wrong way around, haven't you?
I've not had
out of bitterness and jealousy, just because of my deep, charming voice, I think.
But
basically.
I don't know why you think it was my fault. I give you the mic. It's down to you to check your mic. It's not, I don't wipe your bum when you go to the toilet. I don't do any of those. So you need to sort your own mic out.
No, but
so
that's
if it's my fault.
So my son, who's a musician and knows all this stuff, came over and I think the first thing he said is, "Why is the mic the wrong way around?"
That's the first thing he said. Is this the mic my dad used? I go, yeah. He goes, why is he speaking as the back of it? Yes. I went, it's not the back of it, that's the back. No wonder his voice sounds shit.
So Nick's vanity viewers, dear gentle viewers, is such that he wants two microphones pointed at him.
My mic points to me and your mic used to point to me.
Yes, it's like this just so he could hear himself in stereo, basically, while I'm desperately trying to be heard in the background. So for those viewers who've wondered what's been wrong with the mic, now you know. So hopefully
this will be good sound.
Be a good sound. Please let us know if it's not. So that's like one of the big news stories of the week, the fact that you've actually worked out.
Me and you are that old, we've worked out which is the front of a mic.
The second big story, and I know you'll have been thrilled on Sunday, that United beat City.
I saw that when I came home and thought to myself...
You actually watched it?
No, I saw the result when I came home on Sunday and went... You must be extremely happy. I mean, not only is it the derby against Man City, it was away at their ground.
Correct. It was a fantastic result for us. I was actually invited to go, but I turned it down to go to a Christmas party held by our friend Rob the American, because I didn't want to go there and see us thrashed. I'm a fair weather United fan, I admit. But when I managed to get back to watch the last 20 minutes, and it was a phenomenal victory. Right. We scored in the last 2 minutes of the game. Dioli, I can never pronounce his name. Ahmad is called Dioli. He made the first penalty and he scored a phenomenal second goal, one of the best I've seen all year, I would say. So it was a great thing. And City have now lost 9 of their last 11 games.
So I saw that and thought to myself, God, if we beat City, because I'm a small Man U fan, we must be, what are we, second, third in the table? So I Googled the table and we're 13th.
Yes.
It was like,
yes,
we're having a bad season.
yeah, we're having a bad season. It's just starting to turn around now. So that's kind of my highlights. Really, there's nothing else I really want to talk about today.
Well, beating City or beating Liverpool can make a year, can't it? It's like, well, at least we beat one of them. Yeah.
We'll jump straight into what we talked. And there's something I wanted to talk about last week, which I found out about, and I thought our viewers may be interested in hearing about it. Have you heard of an organisation called RICU? RICU?
No.
The Research, Information and Communications Unit.
No.
A division of the UK's Home Office, established in 2007 under the Prevent Act.
No.
I hadn't either.
Yeah.
So I saw an article about this, and you and I often talk about the reaction to the Manchester bombing and the Southport thing and all that sort of stuff. And this organisation is basically a PSYOP organisation that sits within the Home Office. So, and I sent you a picture. In 2014, do you remember when a British aid worker was beheaded on YouTube? It was quite big. It was big news.
He was from Salford.
Was he from Salford?
Yeah, I think he was from Salford.
Was it in Syria it took place? I can't remember where it was.
Yes, Syria. Yeah. He was delivering aid.
Yeah.
And ISIS got him and chopped his head off.
The next day or 2 days later in the papers, in particular in the Sun, there was a picture of a Muslim lady wearing a hijab made of a Union Jack. I don't know if you remember seeing that image. I did send it to you.
Yeah.
Apparently, that image was sent out from this organisation in the Home Office the day after so they had this image ready and they sent it out of the Home Office to the media and said, please publish this picture to try and quell down any anti-Islamic sentiment as a result of that heading. Were you aware that these sort of things were happening at this level in this country?
I would have suspected it, yes. So even though I've not heard of that organisation, I would have put money on that such an organisation existed within the UK government.
Yeah. So do you remember the song Don't Look Back in Anger after the Southport?
Manchester bombing.
Sorry, the Manchester bombings. Again, that came from this unit. The instruction to start using that terminology and using that music as well.
I think I remember reading something about that a couple of years ago, many years after the event, that it came from a government department. At the time, I thought that was spontaneous.
Yeah.
But it turns out it wasn't spontaneous. We were being... It's called a nudge effect, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where they nudge the population towards where they want them to go.
Yeah. And I think what is quite chilling for me is there are now in the Home Office there's over 700 Muslims there's an organisation within the Home Office that encourages Muslims to be members of it or whatever.
Yeah.
And part of their role is to act to further Muslim interests and also to recruit more Muslims into the Home Office. So what we seem to have now, and this RICU unit I suspect is populated with quite a lot of these people, is something working actively within our government in one of our major institutional departments to basically further Muslim interests and dampen down any reaction to any kind of anti-Muslim sentiment in this country. I mean, it's kind of shocking that this is there and it's in plain sight now, and we're not really doing anything about it, are we?
I'm not sure if it's there to promote Muslim interests. It's definitely there to dampen down anti-Muslim feeling. But there's an argument to be made that anti-Muslim feeling, to a certain extent, is needed and required. How else does the Muslim community fix itself and deal with the lunatics if there's not consequences for the Muslim community if they don't? Otherwise, there's no consequences, and we humans change their behaviour due to consequences. I'm not saying it'd be nice for that Muslim community to change their behaviour because of external forces, but it's needed. We have many migrant communities, and the Muslim faith is a migrant faith into this country. We have many migrant communities in this country that are failing, that are damaging this community and damaging society in general, and we allow them to do it because we're too scared to challenge them, and we're too scared to say to them, you need to sort your shit out. Because if you don't sort your Somali shit out, you don't change your Islamic ways, you don't change this, you don't change your Indian caste system in this country, you're a Nigerian, if you don't stop practicing your voodoo and trying to kill kids because you think they've got demons in them, then there'll be hell to pay in this country. And we don't do it to any of these migrant communities. And we need to, because they live on our island, in our country, and this country has traditions and the rule of law. But we're all too, the government for 50 years has been too scared to have these conversations. So it's easier to try to force the majority population to accept voodoo, to accept witchcraft, to accept Islamic terrorism, to accept all the other bollocks that happens in third world countries. It's easier to get me and you to do it because we're more pliable.
Yeah.
We're more law abiding. So let's me and you change to fit in with the third world cultures we keep importing in.
We're going to talk about that in a minute, which is about the first cousin thing. But I think the point here is we're asking people to act against these foreign agents and the foreign cultures that are causing these problems for us. But our institutions are actively working against us to do that. So when people try and do these things, we have organisations like RICU who are basically actively trying to calm people down, sending out false media and false information to calm things down, and it's populated by a religion, a people, a faith that is a complete antithesis of the core faith and the belief and culture in this country. That's the reality of it. We wonder why. We talk about the Home Office. The Home Office is in charge of immigration. But if you've got 700 Muslims, possibly foreign national Muslims, working in the Home Office, what are they going to do about immigration? Well,
it's more than, there's 700 working maybe in that department.
Yeah.
But, the Home Office is huge.
Yes.
100,000 people work there, something like that. There's tens of thousands of Muslims working there. Almost every couple of months, there's a story of someone being arrested in the Home Office. A couple of weeks ago, a woman got arrested. Muslim woman, not even born in the country, selling national insurance numbers from the Home Office to illegal immigrants. They arrested some people last month as well. One of them was an illegal immigrant working in the Home Office. Shouldn't have been in the country, not allowed to work. Working in the Home Office!
Yeah.
Checks are shit.
Yeah.
So the Home Office, people have been saying for decades now, is not fit for purpose. It does nothing well.
Yeah.
So probably needs to be broken up and a new department being created and sacking everyone in the Home Office at the moment.
Is that what you would do if you came to power? You just basically sack most of the senior people there and get rid of 50% of the staff or something like that?
Oh, I would go through our civil service in this country with an axe. I'd get rid of I wouldn't just cut the waste. I'm talking about getting rid of whole departments.
Yeah.
Whole departments going. We don't need
I think you're right. Things like RICU, you should just wipe it out. Yeah, just get it going.
A good one at not the Home Office, a good one in Westminster is the Education Department. Why do we need an education department when education has been devolved to every council in the country?
Yeah.
So councils run education, but we have a department in Westminster that will employ tens of thousands of people and can't do anything because the councils have the power. I'm not saying there's no need for having some people in Westminster looking at education. Yeah, let's get 15 of them.
Yeah.
We don't need 10,000 of them in a whole big building doing nothing. So all these things can go.
Yeah. Just talking about institutions working against us, there's a lot of news this week about court cases, when they're happening, why they're happening, and things that have happened. But So I've want to call this section the crooked courts, and I wanted to speak about one judge in particular. I think you're probably aware of him. He's called Judge Tan Ikram. So this is the judge, and I'm not sure if he's a Muslim or not. He certainly looks Asian or whatever, or Indian or Pakistani or something. Do you remember that on one of the Palestinian marches, there were 3 women wearing suits with paraglider badges on or something like that?
2 black women. It was 2 black women, it was 2 black 20-year-old women.
So I think it said 3 women, but anyway.
So I saw the pictures of 2 of them,
So basically, the paragliders, for our viewers, were used by Hamas when they came into Israel on October the 7th and killed 1,300 people. It was a mechanism they got for going under the radar. So they were celebrating this.
They were arrested and prosecuted for promotion and celebration of terrorism.
Correct. So this Judge Tan Ikram let them off.
Yep. Slap on the wrist they got.
Slap on the wrist. There was a trans person, I think, who was talking about punching a turf, threatening violence against... it may have been Jane.
I remember seeing it. It was a street demonstration with speakers.
Yeah.
And he stood up on stage saying we all should be punching turfs in the face.
Yeah.
Again, incitement to violence.
Incitement to violence. Judge Tan Ikram let him off, basically. The case this week that Judge Tan Ikram tried was the woman who threw a milkshake over Nigel Farage, who was an OnlyFans person or whatever, trying to get publicity. But basically... committed an act of violence through a
assault.
And don't forget, it happened to be a milkshake. It could be anything. It could be acid. It could be whatever you know in that situation. So to me, that's a very clear criminal assault that should end in some sort of prosecution, a jail sentence. He freed her as well.
Her sentence should be harsher because she assaulted someone campaigning to be a politician. That should be a harsher sentence than her throwing a milkshake at me and you. Because what she's attacking is not only Nigel Farage, not only Reform UK, not only him trying to stand as an MP, she's also attacking in some way our democracy. That, you do not have free speech, Nigel Farage. You cannot campaign in this country because you're open to assault. And the fact she got a slap on the wrist reinforces that message. And I'm not saying that...
But it's okay. Yeah.
I'm not saying that makes other people want to do it. I'm just saying other people who are predisposed to violence now go, no consequences, is there? Maybe I punch him in the face next time I see a politician I don't like. And then when we get to a stage where a politician like Joe Cox gets murdered in the street, everybody turns around and goes, why did this happen? It's because you don't punish the people who are beginning at the very low level of assaulting politicians. And I don't care who the I don't even like Joe Cox. I disagree with almost everything she ever said. But no way should she ever be assaulted, be attacked, be murdered because of what she believes and what she says. So you might not believe in Nigel Farage. You might think he's a racist, which he's not. You might think he's the most evil man in the world. It doesn't matter, because once we start normalising assaulting our politicians, somebody always wants to assault a politician.
And so then there was a final case that Judge Tan Ikram was involved in, which was a police officer who was posting jokes on WhatsApp. I don't know what kind of jokes they were, maybe racist, I don't really know, but he was put in jail. So we've got a case here where we've got a judge. This is kind of one of our senior judges in the country, who he's had 4 cases in front of him. One of women supporting a terrorist organisation openly in the streets of London. The second one is a man inciting violence against women. And the third one is somebody throwing an object, potentially dangerous object, at one of our mainstream politicians. He's freed all those people, but he's imprisoned a copper for posting some jokes on WhatsApp. What the hell's going on?
We need to ask, why is he given these cases? Because you can't tell a judge what to do. But if you know certain judges have certain views, he's also the judge that liked stuff on LinkedIn about Palestine and stuff like that. So we know how he thinks.
Yeah.
If we send him the cases we know he doesn't like, he's bound to punish them. Or we send him cases he's sympathetic to, is more like... So there's a way of perverting justice in every country.
Yeah.
And that can be
It's
one
a kind of
ways.
collusion, but it's a kind of unspoken collusion, isn't it? You identify a judge who has particular political views, thinks in a particular way, and you send people to him that you want to get freed, or vice versa. Put in jail, don't you?
Well, you can say something like, you cannot influence a train, but if you lay down the tracks, the train goes in that direction.
Yes, that's a really good point. So I want to move on from this theme, because this judge, I don't know whether he's going to be involved in this, but January 20th next year is an important day because it's the presidential inauguration of Trump, who we supported. Big day. There'll be lots of media coverage whatsoever. And there's 3 cases that are due to come to trial next year. One is the Southport killer trial, which is Axel Rudikabana. The second one is the trial of Ricky Jones, who was a Labour councillor who threatened on camera, or suggested on camera, that the throat should be slit of the so-called far right. Well, the Enough is Enough.
The people demonstrating about the death of 3 little girls.
Yes, the people demonstrating, he suggested their throats should be slit on camera, and was cheered on by members of the Green Party, I think, in that one, if you remember. And then the third one is a guy called Anthony Eason, who's been tried for the attempted murder of Lieutenant Colonel Mark Teaton. So if you don't remember that, he was stabbed like 40 times. It was only his wife begging him to stop stabbing her husband that made him stop stabbing her husband. Correct. So these are major cases relating to immigration, relating to so the guy who stabbed Mark Teaton was an African immigrant. I don't know where from. Ricky Jones is obviously a Muslim Labour councillor who's threatening to kill...
I don't think he's Muslim. He looked Caribbean descent or something.
He's a Labour councillor.
He's kicked out now.
Who's basically threatening people who are protesting about the Southport killers, and then the Southport killer himself, who we now suspect or believe to be a Muslim, who killed the 3 girls and injured various other people in Southport. So I referred to Trump's inauguration. Now, something that absolutely, and I really don't know why there's not more fuss about it, when do you think their trials are going to start?
Same day.
Same day.
Same day.
Now,
is that a coincidence?
Well, can anybody possibly believe that is a coincidence?
Well, the Ricky Jones one will be done in a day. So that one will get no attention because they'll all be talking about Trump. So, and again, I don't think Ricky Jones, to a certain extent, should be punished. I don't think what he said was an incitement to violence. What he said sounded like incitement to violence, but I don't think he meant, and there was no intent, I don't think he wanted anyone's throat slit. He will not do any jail time. He'll get a slap on the wrist. And what that will do will highlight again the 2-tier system of our criminal justice system. Just because I disagree with him doesn't mean I want him sent to jail, because I don't want him sent to jail, because anyone saying that shouldn't be sent to jail. And just because he's on the other side doesn't mean I want him sent to jail, because they sent some of our people to jail.
Yeah, I mean, my view on that is the fact he was out on the streets at that point at the same time as the Enough is Enough march was happening. I think that is incitement to violence. If he'd been doing it at home on Twitter, we should slit the throats of anybody who supports Tommy Robinson or whatever, then that, I agree, would be kind of more of just like a general stupid comment. But he was on the streets.
He was on the streets at a demonstration. But again, I don't want, just because I disagree with him, I don't want him punished because I disagree with him. I don't think he should be charged with that. But because we have a 2-tier justice system, his court case will last several hours. That'll be gone. And because it's Trump's inauguration, he'll get no press time, that court case. That's why they're doing it. The other 2 will go on for weeks, if not months, court cases.
Correct.
So the guy who stabbed the army officer He is going to plead mental because he obviously is mental, but that's not the answer to this. The answer to this is, what was he doing in the country?
Yeah.
That's the answer to that one, because he's an immigrant. What's he doing in the country? He may or may not be mental. I don't care. Deport him. He's not our problem. He never should have been here, but he should be deported. The big one is Axel Ruder Cabana, whatever. That's the one that is the most interesting, because this is the case, if some of the rumours are true, that can bring down Keir Starmer. So what did Keir Starmer know and when? Did Keir Starmer know within 48 hours that he was a Muslim convert, if it turns out he is, which we all think he is? Did Keir Starmer have any dealings with his father at any point in the last 20, 30 years? He's denied representing him for his asylum appeal, but that doesn't mean he's not representing him somewhere else, or wasn't connected to the case, because I didn't represent him. I was just working on part of the... So they've got... When you listen to what politicians say with their excuses, you've got to be really careful, because when this was put to 10 Downing Street, the answer from the government was, Keir Starmer never represented this guy's father in 2012, whatever the year was. Well, there's wiggle room there, isn't there? Did he represent him in 2013 or 14 or 7?
Yeah.
Did he not represent the father, but represented his uncle and represented his wife? I don't. But you've got to always listen.
Somebody said that he didn't. Is that what they've said then? He didn't.
That was the official response from 10 Downing Street.
I didn't know that happened. Oh, really?
They said and the year might be wrong, but they said something like, he did not represent his father in 2012. He didn't say, we didn't represent his father.
He didn't say
ever.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know. When did that happen?
At the time when all these accusations were coming out. This is what PR.
Well, that's like Bill Clinton saying, I did not have sexual relations with that girl.
How do you define sexual relations? That's whatever I say is sexual relations.
Yeah.
So you've got to be. You've always got to listen to what politicians say.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And the reason why
that is a real giveaway.
The reason why I'm very good at that is because I've dealt with that many politicians.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they don't. They say something what you hear and what they say are two different things.
Yeah. Leon Britton did something similar, didn't he? I remember years ago, long before most of our viewers' time, I'm sure he did, where he made a statement specific, but it was so bleeding obvious what he was saying. So I didn't know about that. That's really interesting. So he said he didn't represent his father in 2012.
Because that was the accusation. We've got papers here that says that he represented him in 2012, whatever the year was. I don't know And so they answered just that, where they should have said, Keir Starmer has never represented this man's father.
Yeah.
The fact they didn't say that makes me go, ooh.
I didn't know that. So I think the point, whilst I know you're talking about the outcomes of these trials or whatever, for me, the fact that those trials are all happening on the day that it just stinks, and the fact that this guy Tanikram is allowed to preside, a lot of people think, oh well, the courts will take care of these issues, and the courts, that justice is blind.
Yeah, I thought that up to about 5 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that's the point I'm trying to make here, Nick, that kind of, I, like you, believed in the legal system and the law.
I thought they were independent, but they're not.
And I don't believe in the law anymore, because this stuff stinks. The treatment of these people by this judge, the deliberate movement of 3 highly controversial trials to a day where the media will be looking elsewhere is unbelievable. It's just disgusting.
But that's why they've done it. So people have said to me online, I've commented about this online, and have said to me, yeah, but Nick, we're not going to forget about these cases. Well, yeah, you're not going to forget about those cases. But the vast majority of people rely on mainstream media for the news.
Yeah.
And the big story for that day in several days will be Trump.
Yeah.
So everything else...
And I'll be interested in Trump.
And everything else can be hidden by the overarching blanket of we all talking about Trump.
Yeah.
And he's going to say something crazy at the inauguration. And he's going to talk about more policies. So the whole bandwidth will be Trump, and maybe several weeks later one of these cases may be mentioned. But on Twitter we'll be talking about it. Of course we will.
Well, I think that's the point.
But most people out on Twitter.
Yes, but I think our responsibility here as well is we need to be talking about these things,
and we will,
and follow them. So we'll talk about Trump, but I want to talk about these cases as well. I mean, to compound it, Shabana Mahmood, and I think you quite rightly said your view is she shouldn't be a cabinet secretary or whatever. She's in charge of justice, isn't she?
She is, and she wasn't born in the country.
She wasn't born in this country. So in America, you can't be president if you're not born in America. She's also now, in tandem with all this grubby stuff happening, she's trying to abolish jury trials in Britain. So if you think this through to a logical conclusion, you abolish jury trials, you install in all the judiciary people who will vote, who will judge basically based on your political views. You've destroyed justice in this country, haven't you?
We have, but again, she's only following on from what the Tories have been doing.
Yeah.
So the Tories over the last 5 years have been having court cases behind closed doors to rush through the backlog since COVID. The Tories have opened... Everything wrong with this country started with the Tories. Labour just take it to the next level. So the Tories started messing with our justice system and and forcing people just to have a magistrate and closed doors so no one can see what's going on. And they're just taken to the next thing. The fact she wasn't born here, I think she was raised in Saudi Arabia, it's an issue for me. Not because she's a woman, not because she's Muslim, not because she's Saudi Arabian. I wouldn't want a Christian born in Poland in our parliament. I want the British Parliament for British people who are born here.
Yeah.
And if you come here, you're lucky enough to come here and live here. Yes, I don't want you representing us, but that doesn't mean I don't want your children representing us if they're born here. We make it far too easy for foreigners to pretend they're British by getting a British passport, British citizenship, and standing for British elections, and then they suddenly think they're British. You're not British. You're an immigrant. You're a foreigner. You'll always be a foreigner. But if you work hard and play by the rules, your children can be British. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
That's the reward for you for being a good citizen, is your children will be better than you because your children will be British. And how we can allow her to be looking after our criminal justice system let's say she's right. Let's say we should be reducing jury trials. Let's just for a moment she's right. I don't think she is. But let's say she is. What's her history of knowing about this country? And
she grew up in Saudi Arabia.
Exactly, in the Magna Carta and the struggles we've had, and the Peasants' Revolt, and and what we've had to do to make sure we had jury trials. She doesn't know any of that.
Yeah,
she's a foreigner.
Not everybody's as old as you, Nick.
No, exactly. Yeah, but lots of people don't know any of this. But even though we don't know this, if you're born in this country, you have that sense of jury trials are important. You don't know why you think that.
You're right.
But that's because you're brought up in the culture of us thinking
and it's
that.
The same as the Judeo-Christian culture as well.
Yes.
Whilst I'm not religious, I do keep saying I'm a Christian. My entire childhood was being brought up in that environment, and that's the way I think. But somebody like her, who's foreign born, raised in Saudi Arabia, will not be thinking like you and I in terms of that cultural upbringing that we both had. And I think that's a really interesting point. Cultural upbringing. You and I have had a British cultural upbringing. We've lived in, even though my dad was...
Your dad's an immigrant. My dad's an immigrant.
Yeah. But we lived in British communities. I grew up in Hare Hills, which at that time was more a British community. Then I grew up on a council estate in Whitby, which is a totally British community. So I'm ingrained in British culture. I'm soaked in British culture.
That's all you know.
It's all you know as well. And that's the way we think. But you're right, Shabana Mahmood. But it's worse than that, isn't it? So if you look at Shabana Mahmood, she's non-British in terms of her thinking, but all these people in the Home Office we were talking about, if they are not either foreign nationals, or if they've grown up in a very tight Muslim community in the UK, they won't again have a feel for these British values. But we are infiltrating these people into all our major institutions. It's the same point, isn't it?
Let me put this in a real simple term for you, because you like football. Would you want the world's best rugby coach to be Man U's coach?
No.
He's a world-class coach. He's won everything. He's won the Rugby World Cup 9 times.
Yeah.
He's won the... Do you want him to be Man U's coach? No. Why?
Because he doesn't know football.
So you might get someone really intelligent, really wonderful from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Why would we want them being involved in British politics? Because they know nothing about being Britain.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. This kind of ties into the next bit, which is about Labour, and I put Labour/Muslims because there's so much affiliation between Labour and what they're doing and the Muslim community that it's got to be talked about. So the Prime Muslim, as we now call him, Sir Keir Starmer, Labour refused to support a bill to ban first cousin marriage brought by Rick Holden, who's a Conservative MP. I don't know if you're aware of this. So Labour have said, no, we're not going to support this. So, of course, the bill can't go through, basically. But during the discussion about this, a Muslim MP, Iqbal Mohammed, and again, this is somebody who I think is not born in this country. I'm thinking he's not born. Maybe
he's one of the independent MPs who was voted just because he supported Gaza.
Yeah, so he's a Gaza.
So he's a fundamentalist, basically.
So he stood up. So this is in our parliament, right? We're talking about first cousin marriage, which has never really happened in this country. We've never had to have a law about it, have we?
It used to happen a lot in this country. I'll talk about it in a minute. Yeah.
All right. Well, we've never had a law for it because the general accepted behaviour, and I was talking to my son about it, he was 22, told my son, he was saying, it's just wrong, that, isn't it, Dad? Yeah. He said, we don't need a law to tell us that this isn't right, you shouldn't marry your first cousin. Everybody knows it's just... And again, the cultural thing we're talking about. But Iqbal Mohammed stood up to say, this is extremely common, these are his words, extremely common in regions like Middle East and South Asia. Yeah. That's what he said.
Of course it is.
So we have the insane position where a Muslim MP is standing up in our seat of our democracy saying we should allow first cousin marriages because it's extremely common in the Middle East and South Asia. Yeah. What the frick's that got to do with us?
Nothing. But he's represented the people who voted him in, who are mostly foreigners, So I wrote an article recently on first cousin marriage. So there's an argument. We used to practice first cousin marriage across the West. 300-400 years ago, 500 years ago. Well, for a long time, because we lived in small, tight-knit communities. You tended to marry in the little village you was in. So at some point, you were marrying people you were related to. And I've read an article talking about how it was us moving away from that developed us into the people we are now, as in more open, more intelligent. Because if you're a tribal clan society, which Pakistan is, the Middle East is, and we used to be 500 years ago, if you're a clan society, you're only ever marrying into the clan. So therefore, no new ideas come into the clan, no new ways of doing things, no new thinking comes into it because you're marrying people who are just like you. But when you open that up and you start inviting people from other clans to come in and you marry them, they've got new ideas. So you start expanding the way you're looking at things, and that makes you more adventurous. It makes you more willing to take on new ideas and try new things instead of being really, really insular. And that's what's wrong with the third world. The third world has many resources. I'm not saying that the third world are full of stupid people. It's the culture. And first cousin marriage is the culture that keeps those countries poor and backwards.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, the more I read about it, the more it went.
And it's a theory rather than an actual proven.
It's both. It's both. So social scientists have been talking about this. It then also made me understand why certain communities in our country don't integrate. We think it's about, they've come over here, they're lazy, they all move next to each other, they don't speak English, they don't integrate. Well, the reason why they don't integrate, but other people that integrate, all comes down to cousin marriage again. Because they move somewhere.
They don't need to integrate.
And they're insular again.
Yeah.
They were insular in Pakistan. They didn't marry the tribes next to them. They were insular there. So they come here, they're insular here. If we have to overcome cousin marriage, because that will be a big help to integration and assimilation of lots of the immigrant communities in our country.
But when that guy said this is extremely common, why didn't somebody just stand up and say, well, it's not extremely common in this country?
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be extremely common. And that's the answer to that is, what the hell's that got to do with it? The fact it's extreme. We don't want to be South Asia, do we? We don't want to be these other... We want to be Britain, don't we?
It's an example of us importing more problems. So in this country, up to a year or two ago, you could get married at 16. It's 18 now. Why is it 18? Because the Pakistani community were kidnapping their daughters to Pakistan and marrying them when they were 16, 17 and bringing them back. So now we've had to increase the age of marriage in this country to deal with an immigrant community. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's 18 now.
When was it made to 18?
A year or two ago.
All right.
We never used to have an issue with female genital mutilation, but we have now. Then it's something like 1-2% of the female population in this country have female genital mutilation.
Jesus.
1 or 2% of the population of this country. And then we have a look at other issues such as, acid attacks. All these things, we keep importing these people who, let's be honest, are not as good as us as a culture into this country, and they bring their problems with them, and then we've got to solve their problems. Let's look at knife crime within the black community.
Yeah. Killing
each other for fun.
Yeah.
And we've got to solve those problems here because we keep importing them.
Yeah.
If we have to import people, I don't think we need to, but if we have to import people, it should be under the strict guidance of, you need to do as you're told. You and your family need to integrate. You need to get rid of all these cultural traits because they're not tolerated in this country. And if you don't, we're going to deport you. Do you still want to come in and live a much better life than the shithole you live in now?
Yeah.
But no one's got the balls to have those conversations with them. So we say, come in, practice what you practice at home, and let's, fingers crossed, it works out.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, when you discuss with people, I don't know if people say this now as much, but when you say, the knife crime from the black community is much higher, then they say, white kids use knives as well, don't they? And then they say, the female, abuse of women by the Muslim community is a higher percentage than the native British community. But British guys abuse their women as well. But the answer to that question is very simple. We've got enough of our own shit people here. We don't want any more, do we?
That's a great point. We've got criminals in this country. We don't need to import more criminals.
Correct.
But the other point is, we have got English paedophiles, British paedophiles in this country.
Yeah, yeah.
But not at the level and proportion that are in the Pakistani community.
Yeah.
We have knife crime issues. We had knife crime issues there in the 50s and 60s. With the teddy boys and the mods and the rockers and stuff like that.
And the Jamaicans then
Flick knives and stuff like that. Yeah. But not compared to the black community.
Yeah.
We know as a stat, people who weren't born in this country, who live in this country, commit crime at twice the rate of anybody of the British community. That's what the Home Office tells us. Now, within those figures, certain communities commit a lot more, such as the Black Caribbean. Black African are involved in drug dealing, violence and knife crime and gun crime. If you want to look at rape and sexual assault, Pakistani community. If you want to look at fraud, let's look at the Nigerian community. Certain communities commit different crimes at different rates. Of course they do.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they?
Yeah. And why do we want to import that here when we've got enough of our own? And that's the point. Or the answer to this question, time and time again, is yes, we have got British paedophiles. Yes, we have got British knife crime wielders or whatever. We've got murderers. We've got wife beaters. We've got enough of our own.
Yes.
We don't need to import a whole bunch more, especially if the percentages are higher in their communities as well. And there's a very interesting point about that racism, crime, all these things have started to increase again, but they're increasing because of the communities we've brought in here who are perpetrating these things.
A good one is domestic violence and the murder of women. So all the feminists are on TV going, oh, look at all these hundreds of women being murdered every day, men are evil, da, da, da. Actually, look at the women who are being murdered and look at the men who are doing the murdering.
Yeah.
Hardly any of them are white British. We've dealt with this problem.
Yeah.
Now we're importing people to be murdered and we're importing people to murder women. This is a migration problem. It's not a white British male problem.
Yeah.
It's an immigration problem.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? Where we actually started to create a decline in these activities, and now it's increasing again.
Domestic violence fell off a cliff 20 years ago.
Did it?
Fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
That was when they started changing the term domestic violence to domestic abuse.
Yeah.
Because there was hardly any violence towards women. Then we started including things like verbal abuse, withholding money from them. So now all these charities can continue fighting the good cause on behalf of feminists.
And getting their defined bench.
Because we changed domestic violence to domestic abuse. But when you use the term domestic abuse, we all think of violence.
But it's not.
The vast majority is not even violent. It's overtaxed. I mean, I'm not saying it's nice being called names or having no money, but it's not the same as violence.
Yeah, but you're right. Part of the thing that fuels this is these grotty charities, which exist to fund their employees and the chief execs and their defined contribution, defined benefit pensions. So Robert Jenrick of the Tories called this a medieval practice, this first cousin marriage. But the thing I was thinking about, and I've been thinking a lot about this week, is where were all the moderate Muslims in Parliament standing up at this point and saying, yes, this activity is unacceptable, it's barbaric, it shouldn't happen in Britain, in this country. Did you see any doing that? No, I wouldn't expect any moderate Muslims to do that because most moderate Muslims actually believe in this. Yeah. I think you and I have discussed this before. Over 50% of the Pakistani community are married to first cousins. Bloody hell. So this isn't a minority where the moderate Muslims can criticise them. This is Pakistani community. This is a social norm for them. And I'm not even saying it's right or wrong. I don't care. Yeah. I just don't want it in this country for several reasons. The first reason is the cost to the NHS. NHS are spending billions on this. Welfare benefits are spending billions on it because they keep having kids who are disabled, so we pay for them now for the rest of their life. Apart from the NHS spending money on them, but the main reason is it makes these countries insular. And if we're going to make these countries less insular, we have to stop cousin marriage. Now, do I want to legally ban cousin marriage? I don't think I do. Well, we don't need to. Oh, sorry, we've never needed to. We've never needed to, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable with making a new law where we ban it. I'm not sure I want that because what comes after that? Yes. So I don't want the government involved in my life, so therefore I don't want it involved in their lives. Yes, no, that's a really good point. So I'm not sure what the answers are. I'm not giving it that much thought. I think the answer certainly is not, which is these last two governments seem to just focus on, is changing the law to try and change people's behaviour. Yeah, I don't want that. That just doesn't work. I mean, my view is if I got into power, I'd just get rid of half. What's your theory? For every new law you bring in, you get rid of two laws. Two or three, yeah. And I think that's what we need to start doing now. So first cousin marriage was controlled by society. Yeah. That's the way to control things, as racism, and as I said before, when you and I talked about the N-word and the Paki word, my view is society controls that. And society did control it, didn't it, over a period of time. But there might not be an issue with cousin marriage in this country, or would heavily reduce it, if we stopped immigration. Yes. Because most of cousin marriage is bringing someone from abroad. Yeah.
because that's how you get him in the country.
Correct.
So let's ban all that, ban mass immigration, ban immigration.
Yeah.
That solves half the cousin marriage straight away.
Correct.
And then we start using social norms to shame people.
Correct.
You married your cousin, you're a bit of a weirdo. We start bring back social societal shame.
Yes.
They will stop doing some of
Yes.
these things. And then we also start saying things like our benefit system. You cannot claim benefits for your mentally impaired child because it's a cousin marriage, and we don't.
They're excluded.
And they're excluded now because you knew the risk when you did it. So those sort of things, I'm not saying I want those things, but they're things I would look at.
Yeah.
I don't want the law being involved.
Yeah, I can imagine you in a tank on the main street. You're telling these people, along with cleaning their front gardens as well.
Oh yeah.
Just going back to your theory that the moderate Muslims didn't say anything because they agree with it. I'm not sure that's the case. I think a lot of more European Muslims, who European in their ways of thinking, do not agree with first cousin marriage. But you've asked this question before of me, and I've never really been able to give you an answer, which is, why didn't the moderate Muslims come out and protest about the Manchester bombing? Why didn't they come out and protest about the Southport thing? And I think your theory has always been, oh, well, that's because they believe in all this stuff, or well, they support it. I don't think it is that. I think the more I'm reading about it, this is to do with the apostasy, which is basically the punishment they will get if they stand against their own religion or the extremes of their own religion. I think a lot of Muslims are scared.
Oh, well, that's what I've been saying. I've not said that they've not said things because they believe in it. I think most moderate Muslims, I know lots of them, first of all, they're scared. They're scared of their Islamic nutters, just like we're scared of them.
Yeah.
Who do you think kills all the Muslims in the Middle East?
Yeah.
Other Muslims. Muslims love killing Muslims. Yeah. It's a sport for them.
But you're more likely to be killed by a Muslim if you go against a Muslim than if you're a Christian. If you go against the Christian religion, if I wrote a book that's
nothing
like,
happens.
and then I went on set, I wouldn't expect a bloke to come and stab me
The
in the
Life
eye.
of Brian's a great example.
Yeah. So Christianity, by its very nature, whether it's maturity as a religion or whatever, you can lay into Christianity and have a laugh about it, and people might complain, but you don't get stabbed in the eye, do you?
Exactly.
But if you're a Muslim...
Salman Rushdie got stabbed in the eye.
Correct. That's the example I was using.
Exactly.
I wasn't just randomly using it.
Yeah, he lost his eye. So you're right. So the moderate Muslims, they're scared of standing up, but that's because partly the cowards. And so, I mean, the cousin marriage thing, I would imagine lots of them actually think, well, it's okay, we've always done that. My mum and dad were cousin marriages. My sister married a cousin. If that's what we want to do, what concern is it to do with anyone else? And I sort of agree with that. But the Islamist side of it, we need moderate Muslims to grow a pair, and only they can sort out their community. Because if they don't, and it gets to a stage where we've got to sort out their community, we'll be using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, where they know who the nutcases are, so they need to do it. And if the longer they leave it, the more likely we'll be wielding a sledgehammer to solve this problem.
We need to start creating a coward list for you, because you have quite a long list of cowards that you... I think we've just added moderate Muslims to that list.
That's the problem with the West, cowardly men.
There's that friend of mine who took the black pill, who won't say anything. He's on the coward. He didn't actually come on Sunday. He was supposed to come. Yeah, but he may have been scared.
He was scared because he's a coward. No, he's less cowardly than he was, because he's now fighting back. He's doing things now, so he's overcoming that. I don't expect.
What's he doing now?
Well, you said he's having a conversation with you.
Yes, no, he is.
So he's doing. He's on the journey of not being a coward anymore now. So I don't use the word coward as in a derogatory. I'm using it as a state of being. Unless you tell a coward that they're a coward, how do they know they're a coward?
So you think there's the cowards you're describing, you think there's redemption for them?
Once they realise what they're doing is cowardly, then they can fight back, because it's in all men not to be cowards.
I wish he'd come. It would have been great to have that conversation. Somebody on Twitter commented on the first current thing, and it's a really kind of interesting summary of the Muslim population in this country. So I'm going to read this out, if you don't mind, Nick, into my microphone, which can hear me for a change.
Thank you.
Muslims are 6.5% of the population, but represent 67% of terror attacks. 25 to 30% of birth defects.
Yeah.
84% of child gang rapes.
Yeah.
18% of the prison population.
Yeah.
12,000 FGM attendances a year, which is what you were talking about before. And 44%, which is a staggering number, are unemployed, along with 27% being in social housing. I mean, those are pretty staggering. I mean, we often cover statistics here, but it's kind of very neatly summarised in that paragraph.
It is. Some of those issues, some of those stats are an issue, but some of them are. And we don't discuss any of it. The big one for me is 6% of the population and 18% of the prison population. They're represented 3 times more in jail. So where's that conversation? Where's that conversation in the Muslim community? We don't expect them to have that conversation. We don't hold them accountable. So they don't have that conversation. So this problem just carries on.
Yeah, because the conversation is not taking place in our institutions.
Yeah.
It's not taking place by our government, is it?
Not.
Yet.
Yeah.
It's starting to happen, but it hasn't been happening.
Yeah. And then the terrorist stats, 66%, something like that.
67%. I think it might be more than that.
Well, that's terrorist, but it depends what you include as a terrorist incident. If you change that to serious terrorist attack where someone dies, then it's 99% Muslim related.
So do you think they're including the enough is enough writers in those?
Of course they are.
That's scandalous.
They're including anyone who gets arrested, jailed for terrorism, which can be tweeting online. All those things are included in that. So if you look at where people died, that's 99% Muslim related.
Yeah.
30 years ago, it would have been 100% Irish related.
Correct, yeah.
So things change.
Yeah.
But at the moment, we're going through an Islamic terrorism stage.
I mean, an interesting fact about that, the Troubles and the Irish, which was happening in my childhood, far more people were killed than by the Islamic community. Thousands.
I don't know the number, but you'd be surprised the number isn't as high as you think it was.
I'll do my research.
Because I remember reading about it going, I'm surprised how many people died over the Troubles. It's nowhere near the number you think it is. And that's because the IRA weren't always trying to kill people. They were trying to terrorise people. They used to ring up most of their bombs and give warnings.
They did actually,
because they didn't want to turn the average person against them. They were trying to use fear to change the government. But sometimes they killed people, like when they blew up Margaret Thatcher in the hotel. They killed Louis Mountbatten. They blew up army barracks. They killed many people.
Warrington, there was that bomb in Warrington.
Again, that was a mistake.
Oh, right. Was it Christopher something, the kid?
Yeah. I've met his parents. The mistake there was they planted the bomb because there was going to be an army procession or something. They phoned up and said, we've planted a bomb outside Boots the chemist. What the person didn't realise is, ringing up from where they were, the exchange wasn't Warrington, the exchange was Cheshire. So they phoned up saying the bomb's outside Boots in a town centre. So they thought it was a different town centre.
So it was Chester.
So they didn't evacuate Warrington. So it was a mistake. Still evil motherfuckers.
Yeah.
But they weren't trying to kill anybody. They were trying to terrorise people.
I'll get those numbers anyway. So we know these stats about Muslims with all this stuff of first cousin going on, but it still seems the institutions are constantly trying to protect them. So there's a young girl called Sarah Sharif who's been in the news. Yep. She was, I don't know how old she was.
6 or 7 or something.
6 or 7, and she was murdered by her father, brutally murdered by her father.
And stepmom.
And again, people will say, liberals, left-wingers will say, oh, yeah, but white parents kill their kids in this country. And it's true. Baby Port P and all that.
Not the same level, not the same rate.
But the point is that we've got enough of that going on. We don't need to import more of it. And this is an example of more being imported. But the judges and social workers, I mean, who would do this, gave custody to this guy who was, who had already had a history behind him, and the stepmother. They've been given anonymity, so there's no repercussions for them. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I'm not sure what you mean by unlimited, because I know who both of them are. They've been in the press for weeks and months.
What, the judges and social workers?
Oh, no, sorry, I thought you meant the parents.
Sorry, no, so
Right,
no,
yes.
the person they're protecting, the government are now, again, they're protecting their own.
Yeah.
The judges and social workers who are actually involved in the decision to grant custody to this monster, they're being given now anonymity. So there can be no ramifications for them. No, they can't be blamed.
No. I've got a different view on this because I've worked with social services. I've been involved in child protection over 20 years. We're never going to stop parents killing their children.
Yeah.
It's never going to get to zero, because the last thing we want to do as society is take children off parents, because the outcome of children we take off parents is always worse than leaving them with the parents. As a dysfunctional parent, you can be sexually abusing your children, beating them, whipping them, starving them. Those children will do better in life if we leave them with you than if we take them into care. That's how bad our system is. This isn't debatable. There's been studies over many decades on this. This is why social workers very rarely take children off parents, because we know we're going to do damage to those children.
It's where shit at care, basically.
Exactly. So taking children into care isn't the answer, because we're just making their lives worse for the long term. What the job of a social worker is to make sure that child doesn't die, not to have a better life, so it doesn't die. Because if it dies, the general public get annoyed and blame social workers and blame the councils, because we've spent decades blaming social workers and blaming councils. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't blame them, sometimes we should, but because we go down that path, the job of a social worker now is not to protect children, it's to protect the council. So that's all social workers do, is tick boxes to ensure that when a child dies, the council can't be to blame. So the public outcry have made social workers do the wrong job. So we're partly responsible for this with our outcry. And there should be an outcry, because a beautiful 7-year-old girl's been beaten to death by her dad. We should be angry. But it's more complicated than we possibly can imagine. And looking at simple answers only makes this worse. What the answers are would be too complicated to have in this conversation. But it happens, I remember 20 years ago, Victoria Climbier, black girl, killed by her parents. And the reason why it seems to be happening in certain communities is because the social workers are scared of being called racist. And that's what happened in Victoria Climbier. And we had baby P killed 5 years ago. His mum and her partner were both lesbians. And every time they got challenged on his bruises or reports, they said...
I didn't know that.
They only reported it because we're lesbians. The grandparents of baby P, I think it was baby P, were reporting his abuse. And it went nowhere because the parents kept saying it's because we're lesbians.
I don't think baby P's parents are lesbians. It must be maybe another case.
It was a case. Roughly it might not have been baby P then. It was somewhere. I can picture the blonde hair, blue-eyed kid.
Yeah, that was him. Yeah.
I could swear they were lesbians.
Oh,
if it wasn't, it was another similar case.
It might be.
But people are using that wokeness to protect their abuse, and social workers and councils go, we're not being accused of being homophobic.
I think that's the bit I'm annoyed about. I think... somebody stated it here that liberals now would rather risk the death of a child than appear racist. And I think there's a truth
that's
to
what we need to get over. So taking children away from parents isn't the answer, but allowing them to be killed by their parents isn't the answer either.
No.
This is complicated. We should social services.
You put the safeguarding around a child in that situation so they're not killed by the parents.
Yes, exactly.
And in some way.
And that will always happen to a certain extent. We need to reduce the numbers. It's more complicated than we possibly can imagine.
There was another case that wasn't as widely publicised, which is Abiyaya, probably because of the pronunciation of the poor kid's name, Yasha Rashidullah, and some African kid.
They were vegans or vegetarians.
So this is even worse. This is just sheer thick people basically looking after a child. But again, a black family. They
starved him to death, basically.
They starved him to death because they fed him on extreme vegan diet, and he died of basically the illnesses from...
And then he buried him in the garden.
Yeah.
He'd been buried for 2 years when they found him.
And you can't help thinking now, as you do when you come across a black professional in law or in accountancy, was that child ignored, and was that allowed to happen because the parents were black? You know, there's a suspicion there, isn't there?
No, it's more than suspicion. I would say in many of the cases, the answer is yes, it was.
Because it's almost like, you're feeding him this. Oh, well, culturally in our country.
Oh, is it culturally over?
Yeah. So as long as
we can't say anything about that.
Well, culturally, this is the diet in our tribe in Africa. This is what we feed the kids on. Oh, right. Okay. Well, I won't. Yeah. The fact that it's a diet that has no protein, no fat, no carbohydrates for a child. You know, it's just like they must have seen that when they went round.
And we keep importing these people to kill their children on our island.
Yes, yeah.
You can kill your child where you come from. There's not much I can do about that. But stop bringing your children, having children here and killing them on my island.
Yeah.
I don't want it on my island.
Yeah.
The Met Police now, so many years ago, have created a voodoo team, witchcraft team, because black Africans in London keep killing their children to voodoo and chopping them up.
Yeah.
And we've got a voodoo team now in the Met Police because we keep importing these people from the third world.
And this is the bullshit, isn't it? Because they say things like, oh, knife crime's going up or what, but we're importing this additional crime. We've now voodoo's on the increase in England. So people watching mainstream media think that's terrible, voodoo.
When I was a kid, I don't recall any voodoo problems in the country.
But they give the impression it's like a group of English people have suddenly started to practice voodoo, but it's not. It's come over here. That's why voodoo's on the increase. Yes. I mean, this is quite interesting. It leads into, I'm conscious of time. It leads into kind of the last section here about immigration. We talked about scabies last week, do you remember? Because there's now Cresta Court, your favourite hotel in Altrincham.
The migrant hotel has got an outbreak of scabies.
They're all being left in because they've got scabies. And you made a really good point that we're importing diseases now. So we're not just importing crime and stupidity and voodoo. We're importing diseases. So
AIDS, TB.
Well, AIDS, HIV. So HIV cases in this country in 2019, and these are just ones that were first diagnosed abroad, so we know they didn't happen in this country. In 2019, there were 778 HIV cases. That's gone up to 3,200 in 2023. So the cases, we've now had a 4-5-fold multiple of HIV cases, but this is diagnosed from abroad. But 50% of all HIV cases now are from abroad. So we've actually doubled the amount of HIV in this country. HIV was going down on the curve. Elton John and all that jazz. HIV was going down. It was virtually becoming non-existent in this country. Now it's back up again at massive numbers, 7,000 or 8,000 cases a year. Nothing to do with this country. It's all coming from abroad.
There was a criminal we tried to deport 8 years ago. Black African, trying to deport him. He was on HIV with the NHS and they couldn't deport him because he wouldn't get the medicine at home. So he was allowed to stay in the country because he's got HIV or AIDS or whatever he had, and he only gets the medicine here, and we couldn't deport him.
Jesus.
Mental.
We are just a mess, aren't we? Each HIV patient costs the NHS 500,000 quid, basically, in their lifetime, which is generally quite short.
$500,000,
So 3,200 will cost us 1.6 billion.
They're the ones we know about. And this, did you say this was 2019?
No, 2023 was 3,000.
23, right? So right, yeah.
Yeah, but so those foreign-born AIDS patients will cost us 1 year's winter heating for our pensioners.
What would you rather have?
I know what I'd rather have.
Healthy immigrants or warm pensioners?
Is that the choice?
That's a choice.
You should put them on the stage, shouldn't you? Have a healthy-looking immigrant and a warm, little old lady looking warm. Yeah. I'd choose a little old lady. Costs are quite interesting, Alex. You and I talk about costs, and I think we talked about numbers last week. There are some now well-documented numbers about migrants and low-end migrants, what we call low-earning migrants.
Yeah, low skilled.
Which have 90 to 95% of, you might start talking in a minute, of...
That's why I always have your mic pointing to me.
Yeah, because they pick us when I give up because of my throat. So they cost £500,000 in their lifetimes. We work that out. But what's the other side of this coin, which is very interesting, is that high-end migrants, or more importantly, high-end British earners, generate between 300 to 900,000 a year. So the trade-off between the two. So if you set one off against the other, it'd be a net benefit of 400,000. The number of migrants in and the number of people emigrating now are heading in a particular direction. And potentially we're looking at, in the next couple of years, 900,000 immigrants coming in and 500,000 leaving. People are leaving the UK now. If that happens, the net effect of that is £600 billion a year. So it's not just the cost, it's the loss on the other side. That as we bring in low-end migrants, we're losing high-value native
people with money leave.
Correct.
So we keep importing more poor, unskilled shit, and we allow the people of this country with more money and resources to leave and benefit another country.
Yeah. But they're taking that earning power away with them as well. So the actual impact on the economy accelerates in these situations. And a great example is Lebanon, where basically Lebanon now has a population of 5 million people, of which 2 million are now refugees, because they had this policy of uncontrolled immigration. The wealthy Lebanese left. Lebanon is now an absolute shithole, basically. It used to be a fantastic country.
Lebanon used to be called Paris of the Mediterranean.
Correct. The rich and wealthy went there. You could be on the beach in the morning and skiing in the afternoon. The wealthy Lebanese populated it, and it's become that. And I think what this report I was reading...
And Lebanon is the new name for a place called the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians basically ran the Mediterranean 2,000 years ago. So they were a special people. And now they're third world.
They're known as skilled traders, skilled businessmen, but they're now a third world. And the point is, if we carry on like this, Nick, that's going to happen to us. We were the land of milk and honey, weren't we? But what's happening to us now? But it's this ratchet effect of the fact it's not just people coming in costing us money, it's the wealthy now leaving and taking that wealth with them.
It's that feedback loop, isn't it?
It's
that feedback loop, as in the country's getting poorer, so some people leave, but more crap come in, which then triggers other people to go, oh, I don't like this, I'm leaving now, so they leave, so the country becomes slightly poorer, which then triggers other people going, oh, and it's that negative feedback loop.
And it's happening. Now in the UK, the top 10% pays 60% of our taxes, basically. At the other end, 1% of the population commit over 50% of the crimes. So as this accelerates, this is just going to get worse and worse quicker, I think, than people are starting. And I hadn't really understood that until...
it's that curve like that we go, and then it just takes off.
Something needs to happen. And it also is happening. A recent survey of young people, 3/4, it's quite a big survey, 3/4 of them would now consider moving abroad. And on that bombshell, I think we're ending this episode of pre-Christmas episode of The Mayor and I. Nick Buckley, MBE, thank you very much.
And can I just end by saying we keep criticising immigrants, but Father Christmas was an immigrant. St. Nicholas from Turkey.
Was he? Did he live in England, though?
No.
Oh, well, so he wasn't draining our resources then.
He was a good immigrant. He stayed where he lived.
He was a good immigrant. He actually never immigrated. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.